So, last where we left off, Heraclius was able to save the empire from death. Will he continue Justinian's ambition? Well, at least Anatolia and Well, in this video, let's discuss how we got to this point. Welcome everybody to the second chapter in the history of the Byzantine Empire. The video is covered in 4 different sections shown now. We'll start with the early Muslim expansion, then moved into the Byzantine Dark Ages, and end with the Second Byzantine Golden Age. Let's start this discussion. Please enjoy. As said, we started when Heraclius has just finished the Byzantine Sasanian War of 602 till 628. The war exhausted both empires severely. For a time, the people celebrated the victory in Constantinople. Also by this time, Heraclius made Greek the official language of the empire, replacing Latin. The entire population don't speak Latin, so yeah. However, the celebration couldn't be celebrated for long, as a new enemy appeared. Around this time, a new religion appeared in the Arabian Peninsula, Islam. This new religion quickly united the Arabian Peninsula, and it was eager to expand rapidly. The timing was perfect, as the first 2 enemies they must defeat are the Byzantines and the Persians. As both the Byzantines and the Persians were exhausted with most of their experienced soldiers dead, the Rashidun Caliphate manipulated this and quickly attacked both empires. They attacked the Sassanids first, as the Sassanids just recovered from a massive civil war. They successfully beat all the Sassanid armies they met. After taking some Sassanian lands, the attacks stopped and the armies were recalled. After dealing with the rebellions, the Arabs now attacked the Byzantines. The Arabs also consistently beat any Byzantine army they fought. The Byzantines and the Arabs met at the Battle of Yarmouk in 636. Although the Byzantine army was larger, the Arab army managed to win the battle. With this loss, the Byzantines have no forces left to face the Arabs. This led to the loss of Syria and the Levant in 637 under the Arabs. With the empire divided, Egypt was lost again by 643. Also by this time, the Sassanids were in much more trouble as Ctesiphon and much of Mesopotamia was lost. With the loss of Egypt, the Byzantine Empire lost its breadbasket, which crippled the entire empire severely. Constantinople itself reduced in size from around 500,000 people to just 50,000. This shows how economically vital Egypt was to the Romans and subsequently the Byzantines. With most of the food supplies from Egypt gone, the empire needed major restructuring. Heraclius formed the thematic system to be used across the empire. This system combined both civil and military power, making communication easier and more effective. This system also made each province better defended, quicker to deal with invaders. The land was given to soldiers to cultivate, reducing payments required to maintain them. This also helped the whole losing Egypt situation, as it made each provinces or thema more self-sustaining. Each team is controlled by a strategos, Greek for general. This system was essential in defending what's left of the empire. So, with the Levant and Egypt lost, let's discuss the western part of the empire. That's not much better. During this time, the Avar Khaganate collapsed after losing to the Byzantines. However, new enemies in the region formed: the Bulgars and the Slavs. The Bulgars were a nomadic people group from the Black Sea which migrated to the Balkans. The Slavs, already discussed before, easily migrated to even more Byzantine lands. These Slavs separated from the empire, hence why even provinces in Greece was lost to the Slavs. This was the state of the empire at the end of the reign of Emperor Heraclius. With this, he died in 641. Replacing him was his grandson, Constans II, crowned as emperor in the same year. By 643, most of North Africa was lost. However, in 645, the Arabs recalled troops to fight against the Khazar Khaganate. The Byzantines planned to reconquer Egypt. However, it failed. When troops were reassigned back to North Africa, the Arabs conquered most of modern-day Tunis by 647. By 651, the Sassanid Empire was completely conquered, killing Rome's biggest enemy. The Romans had once again outlived its rivals and enemies. But will their end come soon? Well, as long as the Byzantine navy is dominant, Constantinople will not fall. What's that? The Arabs made a navy and beat the Byzantine navy severely? Oh no. So, in 655, the Byzantines lost a naval battle with the Arabs in the Battle of the Masts. This resulted in coastal provinces and islands vulnerable to attacks, resulting in the islands of Cyprus and Rhodes taken by the Arabs. However, the Arabs couldn't follow up to this victory as a civil war erupted in the Rashidun Caliphate. This provided time for the Byzantines to recover. In 661, the Umayyad Caliphate won the civil war, replacing the Rashidun. They refocused their efforts in killing the Byzantine Empire. By 668, Constans II was assassinated due to unpopular policies. His son, Constantine IV, replaced him in the same year. In his early reign, the Umayyads sieged Constantinople. This time, the Byzantines had a new weapon they utilized: Greek fire, basically medieval napalm. It was a weapon placed on ships which acted like flamethrowers which burned enemy ships. This weapon was used for the siege and saved the city. Constantine's rule was generally stable, with one major disaster, which was losing a massive battle to the Bulgarians. He died in 685 from disease and replaced by his son Justinian II. During his reign, North Africa was permanently lost to the Arabs. More lands in Italy and the Balkans were lost. However, his biggest failure was creating unpopular internal policies, which resulted in him getting deposed and gained his slit-nosed face. Emperor Leontios and Tiberius II replaced him for a while, but the Bulgarian assistance, he gained the throne in 705. However, he died in 711. After this, the empire was constantly at civil war, starting from Emperor Philippikos, Anastasius II, and finally Theodosius III. It is amazing how the Byzantines didn't collapse during these times, especially with enemies on both sides. Emperor Theodosius III resigned in 717, replaced by Emperor Leo III. This ended the civil wars and chaos present. Leo III was right on time to face off another Umayyad attack on Constantinople. With the chaos the Byzantines experienced after Justinian II, the Umayyads seized the opportunity to attack and siege Constantinople. This led to the Siege of Constantinople. The Arabs predicted to bring around 80,000 troops, while the Byzantines defended with 12,000 troops. The Arabs were largely unable to siege Constantinople due to the Theodosius walls, so they focused on the navy as it seemed more plausible. However, Greek fire severely hindered the Arab navy, making the siege inconclusive. At the same time, the Bulgarians decided to help the Byzantines, as they know that if the Byzantine Empire fell, their kingdom will also fall. Hence why they helped the Byzantines. The Bulgarians arrived from the other side with 15,000 troops, trapping the Arab army. Any Arab foraging party was destroyed and slaughtered. They also faced winter, a climate uncommon to them. This led to a lot getting sick, which weakened the army. With reinforcements slaughtered and defected, as some were Christians, the Arabs lifted the siege in the summer. Many retreating soldiers were slaughtered by both the Byzantines and Bulgarians. With this loss, they were unable to launch another offensive, as most of their troops were dead. Leo followed up by attacking the Umayyad Caliphate with help with the Khazars. This subsequently resulted in the overthrow of the Umayyad Caliphate 3 decades later by the Abbasids. Although a victory, the Byzantines didn't experience a golden age yet. Leo III and some Christian scholars started to wonder if they had offended God. This led to Iconoclasm. They assumed that people started to worship the mosaics and icons, not God himself. This resulted in a movement where icons and mosaics were burned or destroyed, conducted by Leo himself in 730. This was popular in the East. However, the West disagrees. The Pope allowed icons and mosaics to stay, causing more tension and conflicts between the Eastern and Western churches. Leo died in 741, replaced by his son Constantine V. Constantine V doubled down on iconoclasm. Now, supporters of icons were also persecuted. He also didn't focus much about Italy, leading to the Lombards to take even more lands from the Byzantines, including Ravenna. With Rome in the doorsteps of the Lombards, the Pope started to search for more reliable help. The Franks was his choice. The Frankish Empire was a growing power in Western Europe, strong enough to beat the Lombards. They were also closer to the Pope in terms of religion than the Byzantines. With this, the Papal States was established, separating the Pope from the Byzantine Empire. Now, the Byzantines had fragments of southern Italy and Sicily left. However, Constantine was more successful on other fronts. With the Muslim Caliphate distracted with civil war and weakened, the Byzantines focused back on the Slavs and Bulgarians. The Bulgarians were severely weakened and temporarily crushed after 9 campaigns. The Slavs were next. Even though not much was gained territorially, most enemies were severely weakened. Constantine V died in 775, replaced by his son Leo IV. However, Leo died 5 years later after his reign. The throne passed on to his son, Constantine VI, which was still an infant. This led to Leo's wife Irene to be regent. The problem was, Irene also had ambitions. Firstly, she ended the first round of Iconoclasm, as she was personally a supporter of icons. Although for us, this seems good, as burning art isn't a good thing, this made her unpopular. Other than this, the regency was also able to regain Greece once more, continuing Constantine's campaigns. In 790, Constantine VI was finally ready to rule. However, her mother wasn't ready. So, after 7 years of dispute, Constantine was blinded and disposed by his own mother and died. After the dispute, Irene of Athens became empress of the Byzantine Empire in 797. This marked the first empress in the entire history of the Roman Empire. A brutal method, but nevertheless the first empress. However, this caused controversy, as in the Roman Empire and thus Byzantine Empire, the emperor conducted both civil and religious matters. Although a woman was to an extent allowed to conduct civil matters, she can't conduct religious ones. This resulted in the Pope crowning the Emperor of the Franks, Charlemagne, to be the Holy Roman Emperor, as the title of Emperor of Rome was empty in his view. This caused even more tension in the Byzantine Empire, because having a woman was already controversial. Having a German barbarian as the emperor was even more controversial. The result was Irene's overthrow in 802. Her replacement was Emperor Nicephorus I. He inherited problems left by Irene. By this time, the Abbasid Caliphate had recovered, so has Bulgaria, and the addition of the Frankish Empire didn't help. He was largely able to deal with the Franks and Arabs, using agreements and tributes. However, Bulgaria had just killed off the Avar Khaganate and significantly increased in strength. In 811, Nicephorus launched a campaign to Bulgaria to be ambushed and killed by their leader. His cult was turned into a drinking cup. With his head gone, he can't be emperor. His replacement was Michael I Rangabe, which lost to the Bulgarians in Adrianople. He was deposed due to this defeat. After him was Leo V, which became emperor in 813. By this time, the Bulgarians prepared to siege Constantinople. However, their leader, Chrome, died in 814. His son made peace with the Byzantines, as he wanted to focus on defending against the Franks. With the short crisis over, Leo can rebuild the empire once more. But as he was a supporter of Iconoclasm, he reinstated Iconoclasm to the empire, starting the second round. Yay! In a positive note, his reign was peaceful, allowing the reconstruction of cities and buildings destroyed by the Bulgarians. However, his reign ended with deposition by Michael II. Michael II started his reign in 820. By this time, The Abbasid Caliphate was in constant internal rebellion and civil wars, clearing the Byzantines from one front. However, internally, he suffered from a brief civil war. This costed the Byzantine navy dearly, as they destroyed each other with Greek fire. The weakened Byzantine navy caused Sicily and Crete to be lost by the Muslims. Michael died in 629. His son, Theophilus, replaced him. During his reign, Theophilus I continued the constant wars with the Arabs. Sardinia was also lost during this time. However, his reign was generally stable without any disasters. He died in 641 to disease. He was succeeded by his infant son Michael III. His wife Theodora served as regent until he grew up. This time, the regency went smoothly, unlike last time. Theodora finally ended Iconoclasm, as she was a supporter of icons. In 855, Michael III was finally ready to be emperor. However, he was uninterested with becoming that job. But with good advisors and generals, his reign was stable with no major disasters externally. Other than Constantinople sieged unsuccessfully by the Rus Vikings, the empire was generally safe. And yes, the Romans and Vikings did meet in history. The story didn't just end there. In addition, Michael tried to pacify the southern Slavs by convincing them to convert to Christianity. Fun fact, Cyrillic was made by the Greeks during this time and is still used by most Eastern European nations to this day. Externally, Michael's reign was successful. Internally, he was also mostly successful, until he got killed by Basil, a wrestler from Macedonia, when he was drunk. After Michael's death, Basil took the throne and became Emperor Basil I in 867 AD. He would establish the Macedonian dynasty, which ruled the empire for the next 200 years. This dynasty will bring the Second Byzantine Golden Age. During his reign, Basil I tried to reform laws in the empire but was finished by his successors. Like Justinian I, he compiled all previous laws and turned them into Greek. He also made laws which diminished the power of the Senate, distancing the Byzantine Empire even further from the Roman Empire. Internally, the conditions were stable with the eastern and western frontiers in peace and the absence of civil wars. Basil I died in 886. His least favorite son, Leo, became emperor as Leo VI. Leo was considered a mediocre emperor as internally the empire was stable. He finished the compilation of laws set by Basil I and reformed the government, stripping all consul and senate from power. However, his reign saw Sicily finally getting conquered by the Arabs in 902. Thessalonica, a major Byzantine city, severely damaged after getting sacked by the Arabs in 904, and a disastrous battle with the Arabs in 912. Not long after, he died. Constantine VII replaced Leo as emperor in 913. However, he was still unready to rule. This led to a regency. His mother, Zoe, ruled as regent at the start. However, she got deposed by an Armenian naval commander named Romanus. Instead of taking the throne, Romanus acted as regent to Constantine. However, he truly held all the power. This prevented civil war and instability in the empire. Romanus I became co-emperor in 920 with Constantine VII. The decision was wise, as at the time, the Byzantines was losing to a war with the Bulgarians. However, Romanus was able to use diplomacy to form peace with the Bulgarians in 927, leading to more territorial loss to the Bulgarians. In the eastern provinces, situations were much better as the Byzantines can start attacking the Arabs once more. Constantine became sole emperor in 944 after the deposition of Romanus. He continued relying on his advisors to rule the empire, hence leading to not many changes during his time. Constantine later died in 959. He was replaced by his son, Romanus II. During his reign, two incredibly competent generals rose, Nikephoros Phocas and John Zimisces. General Nikephoros Phocas was able to reconquer Crete from the Arabs and destroyed the Arab navy severely in 961. This gave the Byzantines naval supremacy back from the Arabs. Nikephoros continued this victory by capturing Aleppo in 962. However, internally, it was less successful. Romanus II died in 963. As his sons were still too young, the ever-popular Nikephoros became regent and co-emperor in 963. He appointed John Zimisces to campaign in the eastern provinces against the Arabs. This was the second time where civil war was prevented. Nikephoros and John both focused on campaigning in the east, retaking much of Syria from the Arabs. However, during these campaigns in the east, the Bulgarians once more attacked the empire. Nikephoros requested Rus assistance to attack the Bulgarians. This was successful, with both Rus and Byzantine forces crushing the Bulgarians. However, the Rus was carried away and started attacking the Byzantines. In the end, the king of the Rus was defeated and killed in battle. With this, the Byzantines regained much of Thrace from the Bulgarians. Although successful, Nikephoros II was killed by John Zimisces in 969, and thus John I Zimisces became co-emperor acting as regent for Basil II, heir of Romanus II. John continued the campaigns in the Middle East. This led to peace, which gave the Byzantines much of Syria and Antioch from the Muslim kingdoms. He would have continued the campaigns in the east, however, he died shortly after in 976. Basil II was crowned as emperor in 976. At the start of his reign, Basil wasn't ready to become emperor. Hence why he gave a lot of power to his advisors, while he slowly studied from them on how to rule effectively. He was finally ready and he took all power to himself by 985. With all power to himself, Basil focused on his ambitions of conquering the Bulgarian Empire. He started his campaigns in 986 and got badly defeated by the Bulgarians in the Battle of the Gates of Trajan. And as always, generals in the empire started to revolt against Basil II. To get more support, he asked Kievan Rus for assistance. The Rus sent him their best warriors to fight for him. In exchange, Basil gave the leader of the Rus, Vladimir of Kiev, his sister Anna for marriage in the condition that Vladimir and his kingdom convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. This exchange resulted in the formation of the Varangian Guards, the emperor's bodyguard. Varangians referred to Vikings, which was called Varangians in the east. In the end, Basil was able to squash the rebellions by 989 and continued his reign as emperor. The civil war in the empire gave time for the Fatimids to expand their influence in the Levant. To stop this, Basil started to move to the east in 994 to face the Fatimids. After destroying several of their armies, both sides signed a truce in 1000 AD. Basil shortly campaigned in Armenia, taking parts of the kingdom. Now, the eastern provinces were safe from foreign invaders. With the east settled, Basil focused on his main target once more, the Bulgarians. The Byzantine army first campaigned in northern Bulgaria, reaching the Danube River once more. The Bulgarians at first went on the offensive. However, as it was clear that they lost more than what they gained, the war became defensive for them. By 1010, all northern Bulgaria had been conquered. With western Bulgaria remaining, Basil continued his campaigns. With no other choices left, the Bulgarians attacked the Byzantines. This led to the Battle of Clydion in 1014, which resulted in Byzantine victory. Most of the Bulgarian army was captured or killed. The ones who were captured suffered a grim fate. Basil ordered the Bulgarians to be blinded, only leaving one eye to each 100th man. This meant the prisoners were freed. However, their punishment was cruel. When the soldiers returned to the Tsar, he was said to get a heart attack and died. With their Tsar dead, the Bulgarians had very little chance left to defend. In the end, the entire Bulgarian Empire was conquered and subjugated by the Byzantine Empire by 1018. This gave Basil II his famous nickname, Bulgaroctonus, or Bulgar Slayer. With the Bulgarians subjugated, the Byzantines practically killed one of their biggest rivals. Basil continued by vassalizing Serbia and Croatia. His campaign practically gave the Byzantines their entire Balkan regions back. Basil didn't stop there. He campaigned in Georgia and Armenia, annexing even more lands for the Byzantines. Southern Italy was also conquered by 1021. In 1025, he was planning on conquering Sicily. However, he unfortunately died in the same year, thus ending the reign of Basil II, one of the greatest emperors of the Byzantine Empire. We have witnessed how the Byzantines were at the brink of collapse during Heraclius, losing more than half of its territory. However, they adapt, and with competent rulers, the Byzantines slowly crept back to glory under the three great emperors, Nicephorus II, John I, and Basil II. In the next episode, we'll cover new enemies threatening the empire, and finally seeing the end to the Byzantine Empire. That is all for today. Thanks for watching and see you next time.